So this is the second time I'm making this little video about the mini budget, and the reason I'm having to have a second run at it is because events in the political world have simply moved on so rapidly. The first time I was going to do this this stint was to discuss how actually the impact of the budget wasn't as severe as markets were making out. And perhaps I'll just go over that briefly. The changes that were announced in that mini budget weren't the seismic tax cuts that people like Michael Gove and Liz Truss's detractors would make out.
There are two specific concerns that I have about the unfunded nature of tax cuts and about the 45p tax cut, which
I want them to abandon the budget. It's obvious that what they did on Friday has caused this reaction in the market.
Right that he hadn't told the Cabinet. He should have discussed it more widely, given that it was such a contentious policy.
Let's just go through them. The big tax cut was not a tax cut at all. It was a reversal of Rishi Sunak's ridiculous idea that corporation tax should be increased next year from 19% to 25%. That accounted for about half what they call the unfunded tax cuts. And then 12 billion of that 45 billion total tax cut was actually the reversal of the increase in national insurance, a manifesto breaking increase, by the way. It was a reversal of that increase. So that wasn't a tax cut that was coming in for a long established revenue stream. It had only gone up in April. And then the other two changes, one of them being a reduction of 1 pence in the basic rate of tax, added up to 5 billion a year, didn't even come until next year. And then finally, right at the bottom of the list in terms of quantum, was the reduction in the higher rate of income tax from 45% to 40%. And that is the one issue on which everyone actually got focused and stuck. It was, believe it or not, now with the benefit of hindsight, also the issue that exercised the market's minds. Because the minute Gove got on his high horse and he told the Conservative assembled conference that it was unconservative to cut the higher rate of tax.
They are neither the right economic nor the right political response to the situation that we face at the moment.
Goodness knows what he means by that. But when he got on his high horse and he brought that pressure to bear on Liz Truss, and when she eventually broke, the markets rallied. So the whole debate, frankly, over the mini budget and these unfunded tax cuts, I want to come back to the word unfunded, was really an ideological battle between people like Gove, who are stuck in 12 years worth of Treasury orthodoxy, and Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng on the other side, trying to break it, trying to go for what they call this dash for growth. Well, I remain firmly behind Liz Truss's plan. The only way to get this country going is by growing the economy. And you cannot do that by increasing taxes. You've got to take a view on cutting tax. No tax cut which is designed to go for growth can be fully funded. It's a complete misconception, because the notion behind a funded tax cut is that you borrow from Paul to give to Peter. And that isn't boosting the economy. She had to make genuine tax cuts. So her original plan was absolutely spot on. The great shame, though, is that she's allowed people like Michael Gove to bring her down. And the reason that's a great shame is because it may have actually held her below the waterline politically. We now have a Prime Minister who had set out to deliver unpopular measures which would be good for the country in the long term. At the first test, she fell. And that means Michael Gove and his supporters in the Parliamentary Party will smell blood. They will now challenge Liz Truss every step of the way. She's just made her job much, much more difficult. What she should have done was stare down this rebellious parliamentary party that she's inherited. She shouldn't have allowed them to make them think that they could control her by going up against her. She had to beat them on this one issue. It's a tragedy, really, because if she is holed below the waterline, forget about growth in the next 2 years, forget about turning failed Treasury orthodoxy on its head. what you will see is electoral wipeout in 2024. And we'll have a Labour government, and however bad the Tories have been, and I agree they've been pretty bad, the Labour Party will be much, much worse. The problem with Treasury orthodoxy is that it's born out of ultra-cheap money supply, enabling governments to borrow inordinate sums of money and spend them on their pet projects. What that has done is obviously balloon national debt, but prop up industries and businesses that really shouldn't have been propped up. We've got a kind of zombie economy, and that's why we're not growing. And to bolster this zombie economy, they've taxed it. So what we've got is a very bloated balance sheet for the government, debt now at 100% of GDP. We've got tax rates at a 70-year high, companies that really should have been forced to reinvent themselves being allowed to linger. And that has caught up with the United Kingdom. We've had anemic GDP growth for 12 years. How can you have a country where the population has gone up pretty close to 10% with a GDP that's hardly budged? And in dollar terms, our GDP has actually now declined. Sticking with that ideology, sticking with Treasury orthodoxy, was never going to get this country out of its malaise. We had to do something different. The state itself had to be weaned off this largesse which it had become accustomed to through cheap money. Taxes had to be cut back. The state has to be made more nimble and smaller. Regulations have to be cut. Businesses have to be set free. The only way we have a vibrant, growing economy is if the private sector and those who work in it can actually thrive. And that comes, ladies and gentlemen, simply from deregulation and lower taxes on business and lower taxes on private individuals. The only hope we have now is that Liz Truss can somehow summon up a phenomenal amount of resolve and courage and stand firm on everything else. She must not let people like Michael Gove and other parliamentary members of the Tory party hold back her perfectly legitimate ideology and plan to grow the United Kingdom out of the problems she's inherited.